Imagine winning an Oscar while hiding the person you love. Imagine building a mansion on the beach and telling the world your partner is just a roommate. Imagine inventing dead wives, phantom children, and elaborate tragedies just to protect a secret that could destroy everything you've worked for. This happened, not once, but dozens of times. In the golden age of Hollywood, the brightest stars lived double lives. Hospital records buried for decades, wills that shocked families, deathbed confessions that changed history. Some of these names defined cinema itself. Others died violently, their secrets spilling into headlines they never wanted. This is the story of 12 lives lived in the shadows of spotlights, where fame demanded a price no one should have to pay. If you're ready to hear the truth behind the legends, hit subscribe. This story goes deeper than you think. Rock Hudson, the man who broke the silence. Rock Hudson was born Roy Harold Scherer, Jr. on November 17, 1925, in a small Illinois town that offered little mercy to broken homes. His father walked out when Roy was just 4 years old, disappearing into the chaos of the Great Depression and leaving behind a boy who would spend the rest of his life searching for validation. That abandonment carved something permanent into him. He didn't just want fame. He needed it the way some people need air. So Roy became Rock, 6 feet 5 inches of manufactured perfection. The studio even surgically altered his voice, lowering it to sound more masculine. The procedure destroyed his ability to sing, but it didn't matter. Rock Hudson wasn't built to sing. He was built to be looked at, desired, and never truly known. In 1955, his agent staged one of the cruelest publicity stunts in Hollywood history. Hudson was married off to Phyllis Gates, the agent's own secretary. The marriage was a shield, designed to silence whispers that were growing too loud to ignore. It lasted exactly 3 years. Privately, Hudson continued living as himself. Publicly, he smiled for the cameras and played the role of America's most eligible bachelor with disturbing precision. Then came June 1984. A small lesion appeared on his neck. Doctors confirmed what Hudson feared most: Kaposi's sarcoma, a hallmark of AIDS. He told people it was anorexia. He tried experimental treatments in Paris. He hid until hiding became impossible. On July 25, 1985, Rock Hudson did what no major celebrity had dared to do. He went public. He became the first major star to announce he had AIDS, shattering the silence that had kept millions trapped in shame and ignorance. The announcement didn't just shock the entertainment industry, it changed the conversation around AIDS and homosexuality forever. Hudson died on October 2, 1985, at the age of 59. Before he left, he wrote anonymous letters to 4 men he had been intimate with. One of them tested positive the very next day. His final act wasn't just a confession, it was a warning, and in its own way, an apology. Raymond Burr, the architect of elaborate lies. Raymond Burr was born on May 21, 1917, in British Columbia, and would go on to become one of television's most recognizable faces as the unshakable defense attorney Perry Mason. But the character he played off-screen was far more complex than anything written for him. Burr claimed to have been married 3 times. He said one wife died in a plane crash. Another succumbed to cancer. He even invented a 10-year-old son who supposedly died of leukemia. None of it was true. There were no wives, no son, just an elaborate web of fictional tragedies designed to make people feel sorry for him and stop asking questions. In 1961, the FBI became involved. The American Bar Association had compiled files describing Burr as a noted sex deviant, a label that carried devastating professional consequences. In response, Burr invented yet another fake wife, Laura Andrina Morgan, who also conveniently died of cancer. The only real marriage he ever had was to actress Isabella Ward in 1948. It ended quickly, and years later, Ward confirmed she had never heard a single word about his supposed wives or dead son. But the truth wasn't ugly. It was quiet and deeply human. In 1960, Burr met Robert Benavides on the set of Perry Mason. Benavides was 17 years younger, a Korean War veteran, and the relationship that developed between them lasted 33 years. They bought a vineyard together, they ran an orchid nursery, they built a 40-acre ranch in Sonoma County, and even owned a private island in Fiji where they could exist without performance or pretense. Burr never said it out loud in public, but behind closed doors he called Robert his husband. When Burr died of liver cancer on September 12, 1993, at the age of 76, Robert was beside him. And in one final act of honesty, Burr left his entire $32 million estate to the man he loved. It was his way of telling the world, at last, the truth he never could while he was alive. Cary Grant, the mystery of the beachside chateau. Cary Grant was the picture of elegance. Charming smile, polished British accent, impeccably tailored suits. But behind the Hollywood image was a relationship that insiders whispered about for decades. From 1932 to around 1944, Grant shared a home with actor Randolph Scott. Not just any home. A 5,500-square-foot beachside chateau once built for silent film star Norma Talmadge. The two men lived together on and off for over a decade, and their arrangement became one of the most talked-about mysteries in Hollywood. They weren't just splitting rent. People close to them described something much deeper. Actor Richard Blackwell said they were madly in love. A celebrity photographer claimed to have slept with both men. Notorious Hollywood fixer Scotty Bowers said he personally arranged encounters for them. But the most shocking detail emerged years later. In the 1970s, Grant reportedly told a friend that meeting Scott felt like love at first sight. He even described his own sexuality as something that shifted over time. Homosexual when young, bisexual in his adult years, heterosexual later on. He compared it to acting, saying it would be limiting to only ever play one kind of role. Grant wasn't just the subject of rumors. Biographers claim he and Scott were once caught kissing in public. Some say they secretly married in Mexico. All four of Grant's ex-wives reportedly accused him of being gay. And when comedian Chevy Chase joked about it on television in 1980, Grant sued him. The truth of what existed between Cary Grant and Randolph Scott may never be fully known. But the evidence suggests it was something Hollywood wasn't ready to acknowledge. A love that lasted more than a decade, hidden in plain sight, in a mansion by the sea. Ramon Novarro, the silent star who died. Screaming. Ramon Novarro was born in Mexico in 1899 and became one of the brightest stars of the silent film era. At his peak, he was earning over $100,000 per movie, an astronomical sum for the time. His role in Ben-Hur in 1925 made him a global sensation. His barely there costumes sparked headlines. MGM even gave him a $10,000 raise just from reading his fan mail. Inside Hollywood, many knew Novarro was gay, but he lived in constant fear. He was deeply Catholic, and his faith made him feel torn between who he was and what he believed was right. Studio boss Louis B. Mayer tried to force him into a fake marriage to hide the truth. Novarro refused. Not long after, MGM dropped him. He had real relationships: composer Harry Partch, writer Herbert Howe, a wealthy man named Noel Sullivan. But behind closed doors, Novarro struggled. The pressure and shame drove him to alcohol. Fame faded. The world moved on. Then came the horror. On October 30th, 1968, two brothers, Paul and Tom Ferguson, ages 22 and 17, visited Novarro's house. They had heard rumors he kept thousands of dollars hidden inside. They tied him up. They beat him. They tortured him, trying to find money that didn't exist. When they finally left, they had stolen $20 from his robe. Ramon Novarro, age 69, died choking on his own blood. That night, the truth about his life spilled into the headlines. His murder didn't just shock Hollywood, it exposed how dangerous it was to live openly as a gay man in that era. Novarro became a symbol of what so many endured in silence and what some paid for with their lives. Sal Mineo, the rebel who refused to hide. Sal Mineo's story was filled with fame, rebellion, love, and tragedy, all packed into just 37 years. He was born on January 10, 1939, in the Bronx, New York, to Sicilian immigrant parents. His father made caskets. By age 8, Sal had already joined a street gang. At 10, he was arrested for robbery. The court gave him a choice: reform school or acting classes. He chose acting, and it saved his life. Mineo exploded onto the screen in Rebel Without a Cause in 1955, playing the vulnerable, heartbroken Plato opposite James Dean. The role earned him an Oscar nomination at just 16 years old. 2 years later, he was nominated again for Exodus. Hollywood couldn't get enough of him, but Mineo refused to live the lie that so many others accepted. He was one of the first major actors to speak openly about his sexuality long before it was safe or accepted. He didn't hide. He didn't apologize. He simply existed as himself, and that made him dangerous to an industry built on illusion. His career suffered because of it. Roles dried up. Studios distanced themselves. The boy, who had been nominated for 2 Oscars before turning 20, found himself struggling to get work in his 30s. Then came February 12, 1976. Mineo was returning to his West Hollywood apartment after a rehearsal. As he walked through the alley behind his building, a man appeared. Without a word, the man stabbed Mineo in the chest. He died on the pavement, alone, just steps from his front door. The killer, Lionel Ray Williams, was arrested 2 years later for an unrelated crime. He confessed to the murder, claiming it was a botched robbery. But many believe Mineo's openness about his sexuality made him a target. Sal Mineo died at 37, but he lived more honestly than most. He refused to be silent, and in doing so, he became a symbol of courage for a generation that had no choice but to hide. Tab Hunter, the golden boy sold out by his own agent. Tab Hunter was born Arthur Andrew Kelm on July 11, 1931, in New York City. By the mid-1950s, he had become one of the biggest teen idols in America. Blonde hair, blue eyes, all-American charm. Warner Brothers built an empire around him. Girls screamed at his concerts. Fan clubs formed across the country. But behind that picture-perfect smile, everything was about to fall apart. In 1955, a brutal headline changed his life overnight. Confidential magazine published a front-page story about his 1950 arrest for disorderly conduct. They described it as a limp-wristed pajama party, code for a gay gathering. The article wasn't just cruel gossip. It was a loaded weapon in a city that punished actors for who they were. What made it worse was the betrayal came from inside. His own agent, Henry Wilson, the man who had discovered him, sold him out. Wilson wanted to protect another client, Rock Hudson, who was on the verge of superstardom. To keep Hudson safe, he fed the tabloids Hunter's secret. Warner Brothers didn't panic. Instead, they staged a rescue. Studio publicists moved fast, pairing Hunter with big-name actresses in the press. Natalie Wood, Debbie Reynolds, French actress Echica Chirot. The photos looked real. The rumors faded for a while. Hunter came close to marrying Chirot. He thought it might make everything easier. But deep down, he knew it would be a lie, and his Catholic upbringing wouldn't let him go through with it. All this time, he was living a double life. At the Chateau Marmont in 1956, he met Anthony Perkins. Perkins was charming, quiet, and just as careful. Their relationship lasted 3 years. They shared a beach house. They shared private moments no one knew about. But it was never free. Paramount didn't want Perkins seen with him, and their careers slowly pulled them apart. When Perkins landed the lead role in Fear Strikes Out, a part Hunter had desperately wanted, it hurt. not just as an actor, but as a partner. Hunter felt like he lost the role and the man. Years passed, Hollywood moved on. Hunter faded from the spotlight. But in 2005, he finally told his own story. His memoir, Tab Hunter Confidential, The Making of a Movie Star, pulled back the curtain. For the first time, he wrote it all: the pressure, the lies, the heartbreak. No studio could silence him now. The boy they created had finally found his voice. Charles Laughton, the man who hated himself. Charles Laughton was one of Hollywood's greatest actors, but behind the spotlight, he was a man drowning in shame and fear. He won the Academy Award for Best Actor in 1933 for The Private Life of Henry VIII. Yet he lived every day terrified someone would find out who he really was. When he died in 1962, he was still hiding, still ashamed of his desire for men. He had married actress Elsa Lancaster back in 1929. From the outside, they looked like a proper Hollywood couple. But in truth, the marriage was mostly a cover. It protected both their careers. Behind closed doors, Laughton was deeply lonely. He longed for connection, yet hated himself for it. He often formed intense relationships with young men. Some started as assistants or masseurs, but things soon became romantic. These weren't just flings. When the relationships were good, Laughton became more confident, more creative, but when they ended, he would crash emotionally. Hollywood in the 1930s and 1940s was a dangerous place for any man attracted to other men. The fear of being exposed could ruin lives. Laughton felt that fear every day. During the filming of Mutiny on the Bounty in 1935, actor Clark Gable made life on set unbearable. Gable hated Laughton for reasons that were barely hidden. Things got so bad that producer Irving Thalberg had to step in just to keep the peace. Years later, Laughton was directing a play, The Caine Mutiny Court-Martial, in 1954. Henry Fonda was the star. One day, Fonda got frustrated and exploded. He looked Laughton in the eye and said, "What do you know about men, you fat faggot?" The insult wasn't just cruel, it hit Laughton in the deepest part of his pain. Part of that pain came from religion. Laughton had grown up Catholic. He was taught that his feelings were sinful. He carried that guilt with him all his life. But in his final years, something changed. In 1960, Laughton and Lancaster moved to Santa Monica. Their neighbors were writer Christopher Isherwood and his partner Don Backerty. The couple was openly gay, unapologetic, and proud. Being near them helped Laughton. For the first time, he saw people like him living without fear. He didn't become fully free, but he found some peace before the end. Van Johnson, the heartthrob, trapped in a staged marriage. Van Johnson was once the most adored face in Hollywood. By the end of 1944, he was receiving over 8,000 fan letters a week, more than any other star in America. To the world, he was the clean-cut, charming boy next door. But behind the scenes, MGM was hiding something big. Louis B. Mayer, the powerful boss of the studio, knew the real reason Van wasn't chasing women. Van was gay, and Mayer was terrified that the truth would destroy their Golden Boy's image. To protect the studio's investment, Mayer forced a solution. Van Johnson was married off to Eve Abbott almost overnight. The twist: Eve had just divorced actor Keenan Wynn one day earlier. The whole thing was rushed, awkward, and carefully staged. Years later, after Eve died at 90, she finally revealed the truth. MGM had arranged the marriage just to kill the rumors. She said plainly, "I was it, the only woman he would marry." The marriage didn't erase the whispers. Johnson's behavior off-screen was hard to ignore. Playwright Arthur Lawrence later said Van was caught too many times in public washrooms, and MGM had to act fast. Even his relationship with Keenan Wynn raised eyebrows. Keenan's own father once joked, "I can't keep them straight. Eve loved Keenan. Keenan loves Eve. Van loves Eve. Eve loves Van, Van loves Keenan, Keenan loves Van. The act finally fell apart in 1961 while Van was performing in The Music Man in London. Eve caught him having an affair with the lead boy dancer. Her son later confirmed it. Van had left her for a man. A boy, really. The divorce was long and bitter. By 1968, Eve was openly calling him a raging woman-hater with serious emotional problems. The sad irony, Hollywood's most lovable heartthrob had lived a lie from start to finish. Fans who adored him never knew the man behind the smile. He spent decades playing a role off-screen that was more demanding than anything he ever did on camera. And when the truth finally came out, it wasn't liberation. It was just another kind of loneliness. Peter Lawford, the broken boy who never escaped. Peter Lawford's life was even darker. Born into a twisted upper-class family, he never had a normal childhood. His mother, May, privately dressed him in girls' clothes until he was 10. Even worse, he was molested by a family friend who held a pillow over his face to keep him quiet. That trauma stayed with him forever. His first sexual experience came at age 10 with his 35-year-old German governess. She molested him, climaxed, and then performed oral sex on the young boy. That warped experience shaped the rest of his life. As a teen, he developed a crush on Errol Flynn after seeing him passed out naked. Later, he lost his virginity to Judy Garland. His sexuality was tangled, painful, and confusing. But the betrayal that hurt the most came from his own mother. Out of jealousy and spite, May tried to destroy his career by telling Louis B. Mayer that her son was gay. She knew Mayer hated homosexuals. She weaponized that fact just to punish Peter. It worked. Mayer distanced himself, and Lawford never fully recovered. He was left broken, insecure, and desperate for approval. His adult life spiraled into chaos. He built a circle of lovers, both male and female, and had a pimp who brought him porn stars. He dated Rock Hudson. He had affairs with Montgomery Clift, James Dean, Tom Drake, Robert Walker, Gordon Scott, and Marlon Brando. He even joined in on Liberace's all-male orgies. It was a whirlwind of secrecy, indulgence, and confusion. In 1954, he married Patricia Kennedy, sister of John F. Kennedy. It was a political move, more than a love match. Lawford couldn't keep faithful, and he never fit in with the powerful Kennedy clan. The marriage collapsed in 1966, leaving behind 4 children and a father, too haunted to be present. Lawford spent the rest of his life chasing something he could never find: acceptance, love, and peace with the boy he used to be. He died in 1984, broken and alone. Montgomery Clift. The angel with a shattered face. Montgomery Clift was one of the most talented actors of his generation. His performances in A Place in the Sun, From Here to Eternity, and The Heiress were nothing short of mesmerizing. He was beautiful, vulnerable, and magnetic. But his life off-screen was falling apart long before the accident that would change everything. Clift was gay, and he carried that secret like a stone around his neck. He grew up in a strict, controlling household where deviation from expectation was not tolerated. His mother wanted him to be perfect, and Clift spent his entire life trying to meet impossible standards while hiding who he really was. He had relationships with men throughout his career, but they were always kept in the shadows. He was deeply closeted, terrified of what exposure would mean for his career and his family. The pressure ate away at him. He drank, he took pills, he spiraled. Then came May 12, 1956. Clift was driving home from a party at Elizabeth Taylor's house when he lost control of his car and crashed into a telephone pole. His face was destroyed. Taylor pulled teeth from his throat to keep him from choking. He survived, but the man who emerged from that wreckage was no longer the same. The accident left him physically and emotionally scarred. His face was reconstructed, but it never looked the same. His performances became haunted, beautiful in a different way, but tinged with pain. He continued to work, but the light behind his eyes had dimmed. Clift's drinking worsened. His addiction to prescription drugs spiraled out of control. He became unreliable on set. Directors who once fought to work with him began to see him as a liability. On July 23, 1966, Montgomery Clift was found dead in his New York townhouse. He was 45 years old. The official cause was a heart attack, but everyone knew the truth. He had been dying for years. Clift spent his entire life hiding, performing, and trying to be someone he wasn't. The accident shattered his face, but the real damage had been done long before. He was one of the greatest actors who ever lived, and he died alone, crushed by a secret he could never escape. James Dean, the rebel who lived without apology. James Dean only made 3 films: East of Eden, Rebel Without a Cause, Giant. Then he died in a car crash at 24 years old. But in that brief, blazing moment, he became a legend. Dean was bisexual, and unlike so many of his peers, he didn't seem particularly interested in hiding it. He had relationships with men and women, and he moved through Hollywood with a kind of reckless honesty that terrified the studio executives trying to control his image. He had a relationship with actor Jack Simmons. He was rumored to have been involved with Marlon Brando. There were whispers about his time with older men early in his career, relationships that may have helped him get his start, but came at a cost. Dean didn't play the game the way others did. He didn't get married to shut people up. He didn't issue denials. He simply lived, and that made him dangerous. On September 30th, 1955, Dean was driving his Porsche Spyder to a race in Salinas, California. At 5:45 p.m., his car collided with another vehicle at an intersection. Dean was killed almost instantly. He was 24 years old. His death turned him into a myth, the rebel who died young, the outsider who never compromised. But the truth is more complicated. Dean was talented, yes, magnetic, absolutely. But he was also lost, angry, and searching for something he never quite found. In his short life, James Dean refused to live according to anyone else's rules. He didn't hide who he was, and he didn't apologize for it. That honesty, rare in Hollywood then or now, is what made him unforgettable. Liberace, the showman who sued his way to silence. Liberace was a performer unlike any other. Sequined capes, candelabras on his piano, rhinestones dripping from every surface. He was flamboyant, joyful, and beloved by millions. But for decades he insisted he wasn't gay. When a British tabloid implied he was homosexual in 1956, Liberace sued for libel. He won. He stood in court and lied under oath, claiming he was heterosexual and that the accusations had damaged his reputation. The jury believed him. He collected his settlement and continued performing, more extravagant than ever. But behind the scenes, Liberace lived a completely different life. He had relationships with men throughout his career. Some were assistants, some were chauffeurs. Some were much younger men he supported financially and emotionally. His most significant relationship was with Scott Thorson, a young man he met in 1977. Thorson moved into Liberace's mansion. Liberace paid for plastic surgery to make Thorson look more like him. He called him his son in public. In private, they were lovers. The relationship ended badly. Thorson sued Liberace for palimony, claiming they had lived as a couple and that he was owed financial support. The case was settled out of court, but it exposed the truth Liberace had spent his entire life denying. On February 4, 1987, Liberace died of AIDS-related illness. His publicist initially claimed he had died of heart failure. The coroner's report revealed the truth. Even in death, Liberace's team tried to protect the illusion. But the truth was already out. The man who had built a career on spectacle and joy had spent his entire life lying about who he loved. He won his lawsuit. He protected his career. But he never got to live openly as himself. And that, more than anything, is the real tragedy. 12 lives, 12 secrets, 12 men who were told that their truth was worth less than their image. They were some of the most talented, beloved, and celebrated figures of their time. And they spent their lives hiding, lying, and performing roles that had nothing to do with the characters on screen. Some built empires, some died tragically, some found love in secret, some never found it at all. But every single one of them paid a price that no one should have to pay, the price of being who they are. The world has changed since then, but the echoes of their silence still remain. Their stories are a reminder that fame is not freedom, that applause is not acceptance, and that the cost of hiding is always higher than the cost of the truth. If this story moved you, share it. Let their truth be told. And subscribe, because there are more stories like this that the world still needs to hear.